as we look at the past, I would hope we can get inspired by looking at the craftsmanship and looking at the details and long to build better because we see beautiful things like this. What happens next is we hit World War I. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on World War I, but basically what happens is it's kind of the first war where you get away from the professional soldier, okay? Where you get into countries that throw non-professional soldiers into the fighting ranks. You also have incredible technology that's going on. Machine guns, okay? Mustard gas, huge guns, barbed wire. All of these different things that were going on so that when the men went into battle, think Napoleon, okay? And if you remember how Napoleon went into battle, he would line his guys up in squares and they would march forward, right? If you did that in this time and they started World War I doing that, they would just mow people down with these machine guns and the slaughtering of men. And it was just unbelievable. Hundreds of thousands of men lost in the first week of the war. And so it's a very naive worldview that's going into World War I, where I'm going to support my country, I'm going to support, for flag and for honor and for all of these different things. And death happens so quick. I mean, they were saying that Russia lost 250,000 people a month in World War I. 250,000 people a month. After the first year, it was over 2.5 million people they had lost. It was just, it's unbelievable. So, what happens when realize that the world goes into World War I, honor, integrity, going to fight for my flag, and comes out of it going, okay, that was messed up. Who's in charge? How could this have happened? The mustard gas, the way the mustard gas and those gases even ended up in the battles was, they weren't supposed to be doing it. And so they had signed in the Hague Conference that they weren't going to do mustard gas with it said no incendiary gases with flying projectiles. And so they instead took these bottles and just opened them up and waited for the wind to go and let the wind blow it across the thing. They were cheating and just killing each other. Anyway, they come out of that war with a very different mindset of what life is about, okay? And so you end up having, in the modern movement, a strong push forward for things that are different. We'll talk about that. Really, there happens to be a struggle between what is Art Deco, okay, and this international style. And we'll see that they, are really struggling over craftsmanship, in my opinion. But they also have different ideals of what they're trying to do. I love Art Deco. Love Art Deco. Who loves Art Deco? Brittany? She doesn't love Art Deco. I'm trying to talk her into it. So Art Deco was essentially a desire to, re-express classical ideals in different ways. And you see it here, very linear, very geometrical, but a lot of stylized detailing, chevrons, Aztec themes, all these different ways of expressing traditional elements. So you'll see classical columns and things like that, but they won't be expressed, like this. They'll be expressed very differently. So what is the Art Deco? There was basically, the early ideals of Art Deco were in the early 1900s, 1910 and 1911. World War I happens, and so it gets pushed off to 22, then 23. And so finally they have this exhibit, the Arts Décoratifs Industriels Modernes, 1925. Now, it basically was a decorative arts deal. Basically, it wasn't necessarily about architecture. It was about finding manufacturers, okay? So it wasn't even necessarily artists. It was finding manufacturers who wanted to make modern things. And there was even in the introduction it said, or in the program it said, it's open to all manufacturers whose products are artistic in character and show clearly modern tendencies. So they were looking for, furniture, dresses, art objects, jewelry, all these different things that could be expressed artistically. That's what this whole thing was about. And so this is the exposition. This is the exposition ground line. There's one of the buildings. I think that was a department store. And so you're seeing kind of how this is looked and put together. It ended up just infiltrating so many different areas of life, from the furniture, to this is Rockefeller Center, which is an awesome Art Deco thing. The artwork is incredible. But look how they're expressing that human figure. This is an idea for a hood ornament for a car, expressing speed. But whenever you see that sleek, long lined kind of look, you're looking at that Art Deco kind of styling, which is really awesome. Obviously the most famous buildings, probably the Empire State Building and then the Chrysler Building in New York. New York was growing right at the time when Art Deco was happening, and so you end up having these big tall buildings that are expressed that way. Anybody been to Buffalo City Hall? One of my favorite buildings is their City Hall, which is just this celebration of civic pride and what the government can do for its people. You're seeing here, can't see what that says. I think I've got another ring, but look what's going on here. We've got these huge big arches, this geometric tile pattern. There's a column that's expressed with a capital, right? So it's got like a bronze capital, a marble shaft, very sleek, very modern looking form, still classical though, okay, in proportion, but expressed differently. Just one of the doorways in the hall, no wood casing, all marble, geometric patterns up here. So here was that, it says Buffalo, railroad, agriculture, right? This expression of industry, the expression of the importance of the city. One of the other murals on the other wall had Buffalo and United States and Canada, because it's on the border between the two, and how it's kind of bringing things together. This designer, Dodge Leftwich Dodge, love him, and of course they had one in construction, so I had to steal that one. Had to take a picture of that. But it's almost Michelangelo-esque, figures, working, building, crafting. Love that. We'll just stay here and look at that. I really do think it's awesome. It's inspiring. We have a bunch of great Art Deco buildings here. Farrington Field, no, that's Art Deco. Obviously the columns expressed very similar. Sammy Baugh, the TCU quarterback, was modeled for that. T&P Station, right around the corner over here. You see all that decorative looking stuff there. The Sinclair building downtown, which is now lofts, and of course, Amon Carter, right? And so what happens is in the 20s, okay, Art Deco is very decorative, very, decorative. As you get into the 30s, especially after the Great Depression, you see it kind of reduced and not quite as crafty, not quite as designed. This is a WPA mural, so Works Progress Administration mural that would have happened in the late 30s. And so you can tell that Art Deco, when it was in the 20s to the 30s, very exuberant 20s, kind of subdued in the 30s, but a very exciting style that I love very much. International, oh yes sir.
Question, what is the difference between Art Deco and Art Moderne, or is there a difference?
We talked about naming before. I suspect there's some people, he asked what the difference was between Art Moderne and Art Deco. My quick answer is that 90% of people would say there is no difference. They're one and the same, interchangeable. Now, if I'm a history or an architecture professor, I might have little distinctions and stuff like that, but from all my research, they're the same. There might be a time period, one's a little bit later, but they're basically the same. International movement, okay, also starts kind of into the 1911, 1910. It is named from an exhibit in New York. Basically, Albert Barr was the director of the new Museum of Modern Art in New York, 1930. He wanted to do an exhibit on architecture. So he asked a critic, Philip Johnson. Philip Johnson becomes this architect and everything else will follow him later. And Henry Russell Hitchcock, an architectural historian, to travel around the world, go look at architecture, and then write a book and do an exhibit. And so they go around and travel around and visit a bunch of people and are very inspired, and they come back and they start this exhibit called the International Exhibit, International Architecture Exhibit. And so that's where the name comes from, okay? And it's from this exhibit, but it's really architecture that had been happening since the beginning of the 1920s. And so it's really a study of architecture from 1920 to 1930. And even though we'll use this international name, even, you know, it transforms after 1950, it really doesn't really capture beautifully what was the name, because some people, as I said before, don't even like that name. The people that did like the name, remember this is after World War I, okay? And so they want an architecture that is going to bring peace, okay? Going to bring harmony. And so one of their ideas is that they're not going to have, they're going to create kind of a universal language that any country can use, so that you don't have regionalism. So you don't have, you know, Germany versus England. You have this this style of architecture that everybody can share. It is also the use of modern materials, okay? Glass, steel, brick, right? Which is what you see. And this is the Fagus factory. This was Gropius, I think, but that's like 1920, okay? So you can start seeing some of the lines that are going on here and what they were doing. The difference, chief difference between the International and the Art Deco is ornamentation, okay? There was a complete rejection of ornamentation here. They wanted less craftsmanship. They wanted universal materials that you could use over and over again. They wanted, you know, they would call it harmony at that time, but it was really, let's use the most modern materials that we can use. Let's use as little ornamentation as we can. Ottos Wagner, Ottos Luce was one of the critics that said ornamentation is a sin. So there was a big movement away from, and here, you know, after the 1920s, where you get a really strong rejection to the classicism, where you have these guys, you know, Mies van der Rohe says less is more, right? All of these guys fighting this ornamentation and what's going on. This is what the exhibit looked like. It was basically 5 rooms in a museum where it showed models of different styles of things. There's a Corbusier model of one of the houses that he had done. Corbusier was a very strong advocate for the international style. But it's basically these 3 guys that kind of put this together, and that's what that exhibit looks like. So other things that are happening in this time, right? Now we're between the 2 world wars, okay? Come out of World War II, 1920s, things are going great. 1930s, the worldwide depression. At the same time, okay, starting in 1919 is the Bauhaus, okay? The Bauhaus means, you know, I think it's built house, is an art school, okay? It is it's run by Walter Gropius from 1919 to 1928. It moves a couple times. This is their house, the school in Dresden, I think is where it is, or Dryden. Anyway, you can see those ideals, right? Glass, steel, concrete as the materials, monolithic, no ornamentation, right? I mean, the letters are almost the ornamentation on this thing. But these 3 guys come from it, okay? Walter Gropius, who ends up going to Harvard, Mies van der Rohe, who goes and starts the school in Chicago, ITT, and then Marcel Breuer, who was a designer and did furniture and everything else. This school closes, and we'll come back to this idea later, but this school closes because Hitler hates modernism, okay? Hitler likes classical things, and so, you know, that's a hint for foreshadowing of what's going to happen here. But the Bauhaus was a very important school. It educated and trained a ton of different very important architects and designers who moved out all throughout the world especially when Germany came in and shut the school down, a lot of these students fled to all over the world and ended up influencing architecture all over the world. Talked about Corbusier. Interestingly, in 1925, at that Art Deco exhibit, this was the house he built, okay? The Spirit Nouveau, okay? Now, he was talking about the international ideals even then, and the Art Deco people hated this house. They tried to build a fence around it to keep him from showing this off. Because if you remember those pictures with all that decoration and ornamentation, this was his answer, right? Unornamented, glass, steel, white, okay? And so, you know, this is pretty groundbreaking, and he got a lot of attention for this, but it wasn't a good attention, at least from the Art Deco people. But this is the kind of things he was doing. He believed in functionalism. Now remember, we're talking about industrialization has happened. We're talking about how the cities are changing. Corbusier is looking at it saying, you know, houses are changing too. And so that whole idea of a machine for living was one of his quotes, that this is what a house should do. It should be a machine for us. It should function. And it wasn't about ornamentation or beauty. It was about being a tool. So he is pushing all this functionalism. And why would you ornament something that's very functional? So it's all part of that philosophy that was driving how all this got put together. And then, of course, you have Mies van der Rohe. Okay, this is the German pavilion in Barcelona. That's why this is called the Barcelona chair, because this chair was designed in this pavilion. It was basically steel, you know, these plain marble walls, flat ceiling. It was very small, but it was groundbreaking as far as how to think about a house, how to think about how offices should change, how to think about ornamentation. Think about how different this is. Even today, it looks very modern. In 1929, it looked like a spaceship. It was from out of this world. So all of these guys come from the Bauhaus place and are very influential. Any questions on that? Because we're kind of now going into this period where we jump to World War II, but a lot of stuff happening, right? Between you know, 18 when the World War II ends to about you know, 40 when World War II starts.